talk to me about this. I mean, is this a dead whale?
I'm not over it at all. I think these banks are utterly opaque. I think that they're still engaged in prop trading. I think this is a great opportunity to illuminate why these are opaque and still dangerous institutions.
Then why not just get Dodd-Frank and the Volcker Rule done? I don't disagree with you.
Well, that's not up to Levin. See, what Levin is doing with this hearing is putting pressures on the regulators. So right now, the Volcker Rule is tied up in all this turf battle and negotiations between all these regulators about the language. They came out with an initial rule. It was vastly too complex, and now they're trying to simplify it, we hope. And Levin is really furious that it's taking so long. Now, I don't think that it's his failure about Goldman. I think it was the regulators' failure and the DOJ's failure. The DOJ's failure to really bring criminal cases or even serious civil cases against Goldman, and I think he's putting pressure on them here.
In this case, I mean, nobody loves talking about the whale more than this girl, but in this case, are we really going to get fraud? Are we really going to get intended wrongdoing from JPMorgan bank executives? Or are we going to find out they made really big mistakes? They weren't paying attention. They have terrible oversight. They look like idiots. I think that's going to be the result, and you're not going to get criminal charges out of idiots.
Right. Well, Levin isn't bringing criminal charges. I mean, that's up to the DOJ. What he's doing is bringing attention to the problem of this bank's risk management, of the bank's controls, internal controls, and of the opacity and inability for the management to really understand this. Now, either Jamie Dimon didn't understand this.
And that's kind of an amazing thing, right? Jamie Dimon gets all the love.
It's astonishing.
And you know, you guys, in the Atlantic piece, it's really interesting that you took Wells Fargo, Warren Buffett's favorite bank, right? It's such a well-respected bank, and really took a look at that balance sheet and basically walked away with what?
Well, we walked away with not only can, lay journalists not understand what's going on, but professionals don't understand what's going on, and they don't trust the banks. And they don't trust banks like Wells Fargo. They can't understand their off-balance sheet vehicles. They can't understand the derivatives exposure. And JPMorgan is orders of magnitude larger. JPMorgan has 70 trillion of off-balance sheet vehicles and derivatives exposure. So that's the kind of thing that's totally unfathomable. And if Jamie Dimon doesn't understand it, then we shouldn't understand it. We shouldn't trust them.
Well, earlier today, Betty Lou had a chance to sit down with Sally Krawcheck, one of the most well-known people on the street. And I want you to hear what she had to say and get your thoughts on, are Wall Street insiders just want the whale over and done with and they want to move on? Because listen to what Sally said.
It looks like we're beating, I was going to say a dead horse, but I guess we're beating a dead whale. And, the amount of time that's being taken on this when, in fact, it feels like there have been very extensive reviews done of this. And there's so much work to do, both on Wall Street and in Washington. How about we get Dodd-Frank finished?
I mean, Sally's basically making the argument there's a lot of work to do in Washington, whether it be sequestration, debt ceiling. We made it through the fiscal cliff. They've got a budget to balance. Do they have better things to do than going after banks?
I think it's a very odd argument from Sally Krawcheck, who has actually advocated breaking up the banks and argued that the banks are not manageable. So here, she's sort of going against her previous arguments. I'd like to understand a little bit more, because this is going to put pressure on regulators to finish Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank is not completed. That's a scandal.
They have the pressure on them now? I mean, isn't it disappointing to think that Dodd-Frank still isn't done? They still, when it comes to the Volcker Rule, can't even agree on the definition of the term market maker.
Who's at fault for why Dodd-Frank is not being
regulators?
Completed? Well, yes, but the reason why is that
the banks don't want
have lobbied for this.
Yes,
They've
but
layered
the regulators
in
don't have to answer to a lobby. I mean,
but
a
that's
lobby
what happens,
doesn't have ultimate control.
The banks spend the money on the lobbyists. The banks want to keep the rules from happening. The lobbyists weigh on them to not get the job done, and they can just stand there and not
So what's happened is the regulators are getting huge amount of lobbying from the banks. Now, it would be ideal, in an ideal world, they wouldn't feel this pressure, but they do. That's the reality. And then Republicans have obstructed and in some cases tried to put forward legislation to repeal Dodd-Frank. And finally, there are court challenges to Dodd-Frank, myriad court challenges. So the regulators are very worried and being cautious about legal challenges.
Before we go, what do you think our takeaway is going to be from the hearings? What do you want it to be?
Well, I think that the takeaway is going to be that we need a simple, strong Volcker Rule, and this is going to help put that forward.